Welcome. We are here to discuss yoga for dosha. And I sincerely hope that by the end of this time together, you're able to get some things to think about and some things to immediately start applying in your everyday life and in your practice on the mat or whichever is your practice surface. I do not like wasting any time, so I'm going to start right away. Yoga for dosha. The moment we talk about this subject or we say this word, this phrase, yoga for dosha, at least to my mind, three things come right away to the mind. One is, why yoga for dosha? Two, what is yoga for dosha? And three, how to put it into practice. So this is what I'm going to keep in mind as we move forward. So the first thing is why yoga for dosha? Why? Because yoga is not just a practice of entertainment. It is not just a practice for creative outflow or creative movement. It is not just a practice which is done as a workout. It is a purposeful, if at all it is an activity, a physical activity, it is a purposeful activity. It is an activity which is geared towards the mind and eventually the self with the capital S. There is nothing wrong with entertainment or creative movement. That is not what I'm trying to say here. I'm simply trying to emphasize that when we talk about yoga, we must keep in mind that there is a purpose to everything that we do. There is a purpose to every action and every non-action. Even if we raise our little finger, this is what I learned from my teacher, that everything that you do in yoga must have a reason behind, must have a purpose behind, must be inspired from a reflective thought process. And it is not just something that you think about in advance. It is something that we continue to think throughout the process. Which means that if our yoga is a practice, is a physical practice, then it is not just important that we reflect upon why am I doing it, or howsoever I'm folding, molding, or holding the body, or folding, molding, and holding my breath. It is not just the reflective pre-thought process which is important, but what is also important is as we continue to participate in that process, that we stay aware of the responses and the reactions. There has to be space for that. Sometimes I'm asked this question that, what do you think is missing in modern yoga? First of all, I do not know how do we say yoga, which is a perennial wisdom, which is a timeless wisdom, and divide it into past, present, and future. But at the same time, I do observe and I do understand that how we as a community of people from time to time choose to interact with a certain body of wisdom in a different way. In my limited awareness and realization and experience, what is missing is a contemplative pause. So why yoga for dosha? Because if we think of yoga as a physical activity, then its purpose is to move us towards reflective meditative state of mind. And in order to move towards a reflective meditative state of mind, we have to understand, accept, recognize that it is this body that is going to be the vehicle. And if this body is experiencing pains and aches, stiffness, heaviness, dullness, irritability, physical, mental, pranic, it is going to interfere with that meditative, reflective, contemplative process. And this is what I wish to convey, share with you, that the context that is given to the content that is yoga is through Ayurveda. Sometimes I'm sure, just like I'm a student of this subject and you too are a student of this subject, it must have come to your mind that how do I decide how many times should I do Anuloma Viloma? Or how many times should I do Surya Namaskara? Or when should I do this practice? This context comes from Ayurveda, because this body that we live in, this body that is made up of organs and tissues, is subject to the influence of doshas. The doshas that are Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Now, sometimes knowledge, which becomes readily available, is also subject to dilution and misinterpretation. So, a lot of us may be familiar with the term doshas. But what happens is, with the limited understanding of Vata, Pitta, Kapha, sometimes Vata becomes undesirable. Kapha becomes undesirable, and everyone wants to be Pitta. And then we wonder, why are we Pittafied? I know that's not a word. I'm just saying it. It is because we do not understand, we only understand partially or in a limited way, or sometimes we take a certain content out of context, that we start thinking that each one of us have to reduce Vata, which to some extent is correct, remove Kapha, which is absolutely incorrect, and everyone should be geared towards Pitta. What we miss to understand is what is really dosha. It is not a physical substance in the body. It is the animator. It is that which animates the internal organs. It is that which instigates certain responses and reactions in all our different tissues. And that is why the dosha must be kept in mind as we move, as we still, as we do our practices. So why yoga for dosha? Because yoga is a purposeful activity, and that lens of dosha that comes through Ayurveda gives it that purpose. Now let's move towards the second part. What is yoga for dosha? Let's start with what is not yoga for dosha. This is a very traditional way in which ancient texts were written, that first it was always described what is not this, the act of clearing out. And then automatically we kind of arrive at what it is. That is why in Vedic texts, one of the way to arrive at the state that is yoga is neti neti, not this, not this. Or one of the mantras along with I am that, which is soham, is naham, I am not that. Or one of the acts of letting go, which is vairagya and Ishwar pranidhana, is idam na mama. It's not because yoga is a negative practice, but it is about clearing the mind. I am not this, not this, and so on and so forth. So we will start with what is not yoga for dosha. Yoga for dosha is not a list of asanas. Sometimes this is how we tend to understand what is yoga for dosha, that we think that these are the three doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. And we understand Vata as confusion, dryness, roughness, difficulty, or some discomforts related to digestion. But most of the time, we think of Vata as a mental activity, which I'm going to plug in here and say that, put a bookmark, and we are going to talk about this, that what really is Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and how do we come closer to these concepts. But for now, since we think of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha as certain boxes, as certain list of conditions, as certain list of discomforts, we also start thinking of asanas as a list, putting them in those boxes, that this asana is for Vata, and this asana is for Pitta, and this asana is for Kapha. In the same light, we also segregate pranayamas, that this pranayama is good for Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. But this kind of list is not yoga for dosha. Why it is not yoga for dosha? If you have not asked it yet in your mind, you should. As a learning, as a student, as a seeking state of mind, we should always have not the intention of questioning, but to question, to be curious. Why this is not yoga for dosha? Because it is missing the central core point. And what is that central core point? That central core point is you, the subject. The subject gives the context to Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And each one of us, even throughout the day, our body, our mind, our breath continues to change. This is a dynamic relationship between doshas. But what brings this dynamism? What brings this dynamism is we are not standalone. This core, this subject that is who we are, we are not standing alone in this cosmic space. We are influenced continuously by the diurnal rhythms of day and night. We are continuously influenced by the lunar rhythms. We are continuously influenced by these seasonal rhythms. So there is an effect, undoubtedly, of the macrocosmic rhythms. That is why one of the basic principles of Ayurveda is yatha pinde tatha brahmande. As is the brahmanda, the macrocosmic body, so is the microcosmic body. There is a relationship. Ayurveda is not just about earth, water, fire, air, ether, which then earth and water becomes kapha, water and fire becomes pitta, and air and ether becomes vata. What we fail to or sometimes miss to understand is these elements create a rhythm. That is this rhythm that creates seasons and solstice and equinoxes and lunar phases and day and night. And as this elemental constitution around us changes, without doubt, it has an effect on our elemental constitution, on our state of mind. There are different doshas, even of a single day. The morning time from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., approximately, please add that always, there is no fixed number here, is the kapha time of the day. From 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. is the pitta time of the day. From 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. is the vata time of the day. Then what happens in the night time? It is the same doshas that cycle again. From 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., once again, it is kapha time of the day. But kapha at this point takes a different role. That kapha, which in the morning might be considered as grogginess, dullness, heaviness, the same dullness, heaviness, grogginess is positive in the evening. That same is invited in the evening because it is considered to be a precursor to a restful state for the body and mind. So do we see that how the same kapha, we work to pacify in the morning, but we invite it in the evening. The same pitta which takes the time between 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the day takes a time approximately from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. in the night. The same pitta which becomes a mental activity which propels us forward, which is the instigator of all possible changes and transformations, it is the same pitta that works quietly inside in the middle of the night, resetting the internal organ rhythm, helping us process various emotional experiences through dreams. And the same vata, which is in the daytime from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., takes the time from 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. in the morning. We must understand these changes. Only then we can think clearly, purposefully, how to utilize those tools that the body of wisdom that is yoga offers us, which is Shatkriyas, asanas, pranayama, mantra, mudra, shavasana, pratyahara practices. There are so many wonderful tools, which itself, the variety of these tools help yoga become a tool for everybody wherever they are. This is inbuilt accessibility in yoga, that there are so many different paths and there are so many different tools. For some reason, if we are not able to move our body, that does not mean we cannot do yoga. So, what is yoga for dosha? Yoga for dosha is a mindful practice that helps balance, nourish, and cleanse. Balance what? Help balance the prana. Prana is the main animator of all that is in our body. It is not just uh, as a group of prana, samana, vyana, udana, apana, where prana is in the upper part of the body and samana is in the abdominal region and vyana is in the periphery and udana is in the throat and sensory organs and apana is in the generative and excretory organs. It is the very impulse that make us blink, gulp, digest, cough, sneeze, belch. It is the very impulse that make us think and feel. Wherever there is movement, there is prana. But this prana is subject to going out of balance. Why does it goes out of balance? Because we suppress our natural impulses. We suppress the natural reflexes. When we must cough, we suppress it. When there is a desire to empty the bowels, to urinate, to defecate, we suppress it. When there is a desire for crying, for laughter, we suppress it. And when we continue to suppress these natural urges, these natural reflexes, which itself is the everyday panchakarma. What is panchakarma? A cleansing practice, a cleansing process. In Ayurveda, when the doshas go extremely out of balance or chronically out of balance to the point that they start accumulating, their imbalance start accumulating amas, which are metabolic, unprocessed toxins, then one must go through panchakarma for a reset. But that's a hard reset. We don't need hard reset. What we need is a everyday soft reset, soft reboot. And our body does that through the natural process of natural urges and reflexes. When we suppress them on a daily basis, we are suppressing apana. And when we are suppressing coughing, sneezing, belching, crying, hiccups, sleeping, yawning, and so on and so forth, we are closing the pranic channels. And what do the pranic channels then start holding? They start holding imbalanced doshas. So one of the primary purposes of yoga for dosha is balance. Balance the prana rhythm. Calibrate the pranic rhythm. Balance the agni, the metabolism. Side note, most of the time we are only aware of one kind of agni, digestive fire. In Ayurvedic texts, there is conversation, there is discussion about 40 kinds of Agnis that govern the healthy functioning of each and every aspect of our being, from the physical body to the senses, to the mind, to the thinking, to the moods, to the emotions. All of it is calibrated and kept in balance, kept in check through Agni. So yoga for dosha help us balance Agni, help us balance prana, help us balance our emotions, sentiments, and moods. What else does it do? It also nourishes, not just balances. It helps nourish at the physical level. It nourishes the tissues. It nourishes the doshas. At the pranic level, it nourishes the pranas. Even apana needs to be nourished. It nourishes the mind. Because we are choosing purposefully what are we going to feed my body, my prana, my mind today through these yoga practices. It is not just yoga, is not just a set of exercises or movements done as a workout. It is thoughtfully curated to balance and nourish. But let's not miss the third aspect, that is cleanse. It also is something that supports a natural cleansing process. The physical cleanses, which is maintaining the healthy peristaltic rhythm, the healthy bowel movement. There is a separate set of practices in yoga, which is talked about in Hatha Yoga Pradipika and Ghiran Samhita, which are called Shat Kriyas, which are quietly, silently pointed out in Yoga Sutras in the niyamas as shaucha, cleanliness, practices of cleanliness. There's a separate set of practices which is for cleansing, physical cleansing, pranic cleansing, which is what we just discussed about, the natural reflexes, which we sometimes consider as sorry, excuse me. You know, most of the time, whenever we sneeze, we belch, it is always followed by as if it is a undesired, unpurposeful, stigmatized, not to be allowed reflex, something that we must shy away from. But it is a natural response of the body, which is the natural cleanses. There is cleansing of the tissues, there is cleansing of the prana. Then there are practices of pratyahara, which help in cleansing, pacifying, recalibrating the sensory food, our sensory interactions through pratyahara. How we pick these practices, this is the third part. How do we pick yoga for dosha? If it is not a set of asana, which is so easy to then apply, right? Can someone give me a list? And believe me, if you search in some search engine, it will show up a list of asanas and pranayamas, that this is good for balancing vata and this is good for balancing pitta and this is good for balancing kapha. And maybe as a first step, it is an okay step. But it becomes an issue, it becomes a limitation, it becomes a dilution, it becomes a, to some extent, appropriation when we don't take the second step, when we just stop there. And this, as I mentioned before, that the most important thing in yoga as a practice is the context. And the context is given by Ayurveda. In Ayurveda, what is the context? The context is not vata, pitta, kapha. The context is the macrocosmic rhythms. But the macrocosmic rhythms alone do not serve a purpose. What we need to understand is the interaction of macrocosmic rhythms with the individual. So we are back to the individual. But for the individual, it is not about taking an online assessment or filling up a form to understand what is my prakriti and what is my vikriti. Let's kind of discuss these two terms a little bit. Prakriti and vikriti. Prakriti. Prakriti. Pra stands for prakasha, which means light, which symbolizes sattva. Kra stands for kriya, which is symbolizing rajas, movement. And iti stands for sthiti, and that symbolizes restraint or stoppage, and that symbolizes tamas. So prakriti, please understand that this is so important, because most of the time prakriti is understood as vata pitta kapha. What is my dosha? Because when someone says what is my dosha, it's an incomplete question, first of all. Because what is my dosha is not conveying if we are trying to understand that which is our innate constitution or that which is out of balance constitution. Innate constitution is called prakriti, and that which is out of balance is called vikriti, where vik represents deviation, movement away from the balanced constitution. So the correct, appropriate question, thought, whether it's in the mind of an individual or if we are asking somebody, would be not what is my dosha. The correct curiosity would be what is my prakriti and what is my vikriti, which interestingly changes the question altogether, not just from the point of view of what is my dosha, but we understand prakriti as sattva, rajas, tamas. What do we arrive at? Does it ring a bell in your mind? What is sattva, rajas, and tamas? It is gunas, not doshas. It is the guna which is the foundation of the doshas. So, what gives context to dosha? Gunas give context to dosha. This is what is important to understand. Sattva, rajas, tamas. These are the three primary gunas, also known as three gunas, which are considered to be a mental component or a concept that works at the level of mind, which makes sense because as we come closer to the consciousness, the Atman, the Purusha, we are obviously moving away from the physical and moving towards the subtler realms, which means that which will be closest to Purusha would not be the body, but would be the mind. That is the starting point. When we assess, when we understand, when we sit with, when we reflect upon what is my mental guna in the moment, which means that if we create this idea in our mind, what is my prakriti and what is my vikriti, which is, by the way, a way better question and inquiry than what is my dosha, that itself can again become a trap. Because then we stay in that bracket that I got my dosha assessed or I took this test, and my prakriti is, just as a hypothetical situation, my prakriti is pitta, but my vikriti, the out of balance constitution, is vata. And then we stay in this bracket. What we fail to think or assess or reflect upon is continuously there is a change. The change is not just because of the macrocosmic rhythm. The change is also instigated by our internal rhythm. It is not just exogenous rhythm, external rhythm, internal rhythm. Internal rhythm, which is regulated by three things. Ahara, what we eat. Now, this is not just this question, what we eat, but in what combination we eat, how much we eat, when do we eat. There are all these other questions attached there. But think of one big thing: food. Nidra. Nidra means sleep. But again, it is not just a standalone concept. When do we sleep? How much do we sleep? What is the quality of sleep? Do we take rest? Do we take pauses? Do we have time to rest and digest? All this rest, idea of rest, comes under Nidra. Then the third thing is brahmacharya. What is our everyday lifestyle? How do our senses interact? And how do we move? How much do we exercise? How much of our life is sedentary? These are the three things: diet, rest, and lifestyle or everyday movement that then informs the internal rhythm. And based on the changes in these areas, if you did not sleep well, because you did not eat well, because we were hungry, or because we overate something that we absolutely love, all these things, or we had a day that was very heavy, emotionally heavy, mentally heavy, or a day where we did not have as much movement, which is required to give to the body. All these things also play a role in either maintaining Prakriti or creating Vikriti. Are you seeing that there are layers? The question is not as simple: what is dosha, what is yoga for dosha, and what is my dosha? We must ask more questions. We must have more curiosity than just that. We must not give in to just receiving a list of asanas and pranayamas and call that as purposeful information. Yes, it is information, but is it applicable all the time to each one of us? What is applicable, what will be beneficial, would be to understand. And this is where I wish it is your takeaway, my friends, that we ask ourselves and we understand the concept of gunas. There is mental gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, which I'll share about a little bit more soon. And then there is physical gunas, which is 10 pair of opposites, a total of 20 gunas. And these 20 gunas are the nature, the swabhava of the doshas. The doshas are understood in the light of physical gunas. What are these 20 gunas? These are, first of all, pair of opposites. The first one is called guru. Guru means heavy. And the opposite of it is laghu. And laghu means light. Now, guru, heaviness can sometimes be pleasant. Think about restlessness in the body where we want to keep that weighted blanket and then we feel pleasant. Heavy stand alone is not desirable or undesirable, positive or negative trait. What is important to understand it depends. So guru and laghu. The second pair is manda, which means dull. And the opposite of it is tikshna, which is sharp. Manda, tikshna. I know that you can see in the chat all these various things that are being typed. Please keep an eye if it is difficult to understand just by listening. The third pair is called hima and ushna. Hima means cold and ushna means heat. So cold and hot. So far, heavy and light, dull and sharp, cold and hot. The fourth is snigdha and ruksha. Snigdha means oily, unctuous, and ruksha means dry. If it is difficult to understand the Sanskrita term, we can focus upon the English words. snigdha and ruksha, which is oily and dry. Hmm? Then there is Sara and Drava. Sorry, not Sara. Um, Sometimes the words get mixed up when I'm trying to speak Sanskrita and English at the same time. Um, there is, let me just speak the English word for it. There is denseness, Sandra. There is denseness, Sandra. And then there is hollowness, lightness. Or think of it as something that is solid and something that is liquid. So the opposite of it is also called drava, which means liquid or flowing. Then the next one is mridu, which is soft. And the opposite of that is hard. Then there is something called sthira. Sthira means stagnant. And the opposite of it is chala, which is mobile. And then the other one is sukshma, which means subtle. And the opposite of it is sthula, which is gross. So there are these 10 pairs of opposite. And what is interesting is to understand them in light of doshas. Let's take one example of vata. Out of these 10 gunas, some of the gunas are associated with vata dosha. For example, lightness, sharpness, hardness, coldness, roughness, hollowness, movement. These are all related to vata dosha. The other one, the 10th one, is clear and clouded, which means Vishada and Pischala. Vishada means clear and Pischala means clouded. And Vata is related to clear or clarity, which sometimes we confuse Vata to just a restless, confused, indecisive state of mind. But if we understand the theory of gunas, the term that is used for Vata is Vishada, which means clear. Only when it is out of balance, then there is that restlessness can create confusion and overwhelm and indecisiveness. We'll stay here for a minute. So Vata is related to dry, cold, movement, roughness, hardness, sharpness, and clear. These are the gunas associated with Vata, which then show up in our body in the sense of roughness, roughness of the skin, dryness, dryness of the eyes, of the mouth, dryness of the intestinal lining, which can then become the reason for constipation, lightness, which can then become the reason for this restlessness, lightness in the body, coldness, cold hands and feet. What am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is it is incomplete to understand Vata as just stiffness of the joints and constipation and roughness of the hairs and dryness of the skin and cold hands and feet. What is important is to take one step back. Because when we take one step back, we will not paint this picture that anyone who has Vata will have all these list of conditions. No, even someone who has Pitta may tend to have for few years or a certain part of the day or a certain season, someone who is by Prakriti a Pitta might have roughness, dryness, coldness, and so on and so forth. So it's important to understand the Vikriti as dosha and dosha as gunas. When we understand gunas, what happens? Then we can choose a tool accordingly. Shall we learn that by an example? We learned that vata as guna means dry, rough, cold, hard, movement, and clear. If someone has vata showing up in the form of dryness of the skin, dryness of the eyes, and if I want to choose yoga for dosha, and in the category of yoga, I am going to choose mudras. Generally, if you will use a search engine and say mudra for dosha, mudra for vata dosha, there might be this mudra showing up, folding the index finger and pressing it down with the thumb, sometimes also known as Vayu mudra. This one mudra will show up. But again, we are missing the point, and that is what I'm trying to emphasize. If someone has dosha, vikriti as vata, and that vata in their body is showing up as dryness, then the correct and appropriate mudra will not be this. The appropriate mudra would be Jal mudra, joining the little finger pad with the thumb pad. Try it out as you're listening to this. Join the little finger pad with the thumb pad, but it matters where you're pressing. Don't press near the nail. Press the finger pad with the thumb pad, only enough to maintain contact. The other three fingers comfortably stretched out. And I am showing you like this, but you keep your hand on the knee or side arm of the chair or your mid-thigh palms facing up. And you will see that when you will hold this in about few seconds, 30 seconds to a minute, you may feel some salivation in the mouth. It helps circulate the Jal Tattva, the water element in the body. So here we are pacifying not just vata, very specific imbalance of vata, which is showing up as dryness. What if vata is showing up as lightness, restlessness, overwhelm as a mental quality and as a physical quality, uncomfortable lightness in the body? In that case, again, the mudra for vata balancing will not be this, but it will be Prithvi mudra, earth element gesture, joining the ring finger pad with the thumb pad. And that brings the opposite quality, which is heaviness, earthiness, groundedness, which is the direct tool to balance that particular imbalance of vata. Versus, what if vata is showing up as coldness, cold hands and feet? In that case, Jal mudra or Prithvi mudra is not going to help. In that case, Agni mudra, fire element gesture will help because it will strengthen the fire element. Versus if vata dosha is showing up as bloating, as gassiness, in that case, we want to pacify the wind element and fold the index finger. Or if vata dosha is showing up as being spaced out, feeling spacey, feeling uprooted, in that case, pacifying the ether element by pressing the middle finger down will be beneficial. If vata dosha is showing up as abdominal discomfort, variable appetite, constipation, bloating, in that case, then this mudra will be beneficial, samana mudra, that prana that governs the digestive system activity. Or if vata dosha is showing up in the sense that it is interacting with the rhythm of the generative organs through the mensuration irregularities or bowel movement, in that case, apana mudra would be beneficial. What I'm trying to say is, this is a result of a thought process. This change in mudras, this change in tool is a result of a thought process. And the thought process is, I'm going to say it, and I know that you will see in the chat, it's called Vimshati Guna Sakshitva. Vimshati means 20. Vimshati. Shata means 10, and Vim here means 2. 2 into 10. Vimshati Guna Sakshitva. The ability to scan and observe the interplay of 20 gunas at the physical level, and at the level of the mind, 3 guna sakshitva: sattva, rajas, and tamas. Where rajas shows up as confusion, overwhelm, scatteredness, confusion, restlessness, and tamas shows up as inertia, drowsiness, cloudedness, absent mindedness, procrastination. And sattva shows up as a clear, calm, gathered, pleasant state of mind. This is the foundation for yoga for dosha. It is not about this asana for this dosha and this mudra for this dosha, or this pranayama for this dosha. And soon we are going to move towards a practice that will help us understand it more. And what we are going to do is just 2 practices, one asana and one pranayama. And what I wish to share with you through that as an example is that how the same asana can be modified. How it can be modified? It can be modified with, are you practicing it with gravity or against gravity? Are you going to practice it seated or supine or standing? How you practice it matters, because we change the interplay of the elements with it. And 2, when you are practicing that asana, at that time, what do you wish to invite based on your observation of which guna, which leads to which dosha, is out of balance? So then, which mudra or pranayama or practice can I include along with the asana to pacify that dosha? It is a thought process. It is a result of thinking more, thinking deeply, thinking purposefully, keeping the yoga in yoga, and not just making capsules out of it, that yoga for vata, yoga for pitta, yoga for kapha is a list of things to do. It starts with reflection. As yoga practitioners, as yoga instructors, as yoga therapists, as yoga seekers, it's so important to have that frame of mind, that state of mind, which is reflective, which is not reactive, which is not just curating a sequence for a group class that we are going to lead. If we really want that 45 minutes or 30 minutes or 1 hour to actually have a balanced response on the practitioner's body, then as an instructor, as a yoga therapist, as a yoga practitioner ourselves, we need to have a philosophical foundation. We need to have a foundation of certain knowledge. How to think. On an everyday basis, it is important to check in. Check in with, oh, what is my state of mind right now? Am I feeling scattered or gathered, clear or clouded, restless or restful? So by doing that check in, I'm able to immediately understand what is the guna of the mind. I can also do this check in at the level of breath. How is my breath? Is it heavy or light? Is it fast or slow? Is it choppy, rough, or is it smooth? Is it with sound or is it quiet? Because all of that is also pointing towards guna. The gunas show up in the state of mind. The gunas show up in the breath. Am I breathing through the right or the left nostril in the moment? When As practitioners, we invite this thought process in our life on an everyday basis, not just when we unfold our mat or are on the practice space, but from time to time throughout the day, we check, what is my state of mind? How is my breath moving? And checking in with the body. I call it a horizontal and a vertical scan. A horizontal scan, a vertical scan. Vertical scan going in any direction, head to the feet or feet up to the head, and scanning the body. How am I feeling through the lens of 20 gunas? Do I feel roughness or do I feel smoothness? Do I feel cold or do I feel heat? Do I feel restlessness, movement, mobility, or do I feel stagnation, stillness? Do I feel denseness, solidity, heaviness, or do I feel hollowness? Do I feel levity or do I feel gravity? How do I feel in different regions of my body from head to the feet? That ways I'm able to lock in where is the Vikriti, not just what is the Vikriti, because that alone does not gives you the answer. Where is the Vikriti? The head region, the chest region, the limb region, the abdominal region, and so on. And then the horizontal scan, which goes from out to in or in to out, as if going through different layers of our tissues. How do I feel on my skin, muscles, nervous system, bones, joints, internal organs? Go in and start making mental notes again through the lens of gunas. By the end of this horizontal and vertical scan, we have a clear idea. This region, this organ, and at this level, physical, mental, emotional, pranic, at which level is the Vikriti? Then we can choose that, oh, today I don't need asana, today I just need pranayama. Today I don't need pranayama, I actually need to move. Today, I don't need asanas or pranayama. I need even more subtle practice because I'm physically exhausted. So I don't need to spend more energy. Maybe I need to work with mudras. This is yoga for dosha. A thoughtful process, a reflective process, a purposeful process. Most of the time, what we are doing is not yoga. It is ati yoga, hina yoga, or mithya yoga. Ati yoga. Ati means too much because we don't even think how much is needed. So we just keep doing Kapalbhati, we just keep doing Surya Namaskara, we just keep doing downward facing dog, we just keep doing Shavasana, we just keep doing mantra without a thought process how much of it is enough, which leads to Ati yoga, yoga of excess. Or sometimes it is Hina yoga, yoga of deficit, which is we don't even use a certain tool, we don't even utilize a certain practice because we did not reflect upon it is needed today. Today, we don't need asana. Today, I need meditation. Today, I cannot meditate because it's a very scattered state of mind. I need to be in my body. So that leads to Hina yoga. Then there is something called Mithya yoga. Mithya means incompatible yoga, which in Ayurveda is also called as pragnya aparadha, crime of intelligence, where if I'm physically exhausted, drained, tired, and still I overuse my body's capacity, this is completely incompatible. It is not just too much or too less. It is mithya. It is incompatible. It is qualitatively a wrong choice, not just quantitatively a wrong choice. It is qualitatively a wrong choice. Our yoga, in order for it to be some yoga, a beneficial yoga, a beneficial contact with the body, breath, mind, senses, in order to reach the soul, the consciousness, it must be informed through the lens of Ayurveda.